What's up, everybody? This is Will. Just a couple of quick notes before we hop into this episode of the podcast. I want to remind everybody that you can certainly leave a review of the podcast if you're enjoying it on your favorite podcast player app, or you can leave one directly on our website, podcast.lovablesurvivor.com. All the ratings and reviews really do help the show grow, and we'd really appreciate it. Also, if you're interested in learning more about the community that we're building, you can go sign up for updates and details at vip.survivor. My name is Will Schreer, and welcome back to another episode of the Lovable Survivor podcast. This week is episode 12 of the podcast, and I don't really have a great specific topic this week, so I thought I'd share some newly found resources. Ones that I'm surprised I didn't find until very recently, given that I've been now a survivor for the past 3+ years. One is a book, the other is a podcast, and I just want to kind of get into them and share both these resources and discuss some of this book that I kind of just tripped upon in the last week or so of doing research, and it is phenomenal. So let's get to it before we really jump head first. Yeah, just a reminder to head over to vip.survivorscience.com if you're interested in finding out more information when I launch the community. It's only VIP because I thought that was cooler than waitlist. You know, being from Miami and New Jersey, New York, VIP obviously means different things to different people. It is not really a VIP list. It's just if you're, interested and you do wind up becoming an early member, like when most communities launch, you will probably get some definite benefits being an early joiner of the community. So again, vip.survivorscience.com. Yeah, so again, with that, let's hop into this episode. So the two resources that I have come across in the last couple of weeks, and mind you, I research, I go through my own thoughts. I share my own story a lot on this podcast. And sometimes the well runs dry and you just go back to the research table. I use a lot of different tools as a creator to find topics that might be interesting. I talk to other survivors. I talk to my therapy team. I talk to people at therapy. Again, since I've been going the last couple weeks or months, really, to do a yearly kind of refresh and see where I can get better. But this I'm surprised about, specifically because this podcast, I guess they started in 2021, I want to say. And I guess, because I wasn't really in my previous podcast just talking about stroke survivors and brain injury survivors. So, it might have been why I missed it. Who knows? Podcast sometimes they're difficult to find, even when you're really searching specifically for like stroke, which is not, say, as common as entrepreneurship or current events. Anyways, really good resource, really a big fan. I've been listening to, I kind of caught up on some podcasts with them. Now, but yeah, the podcast is called No Stroke. It's hosted by Mike Garrow and David, I'm going to screw this up, David Tansero. Mike is a caregiver. His mother, I believe, had a stroke. I don't want to mess this up, but I'm pretty sure that was the case. And then David is a physical therapist and also a stroke survivor. I believe going on 16 years, but I might have been incorrect because I've been listening to like sporadic episodes and going back and listening to others. But yeah, they do an interview show with people in the field. Anyways, definitely check it out. Go to their website, nostrokepod.com. They seem like really good guys. Looking forward to connecting with them, and maybe, we might do kind of a thing and we'll see where it goes. But yeah, they are definitely knowledgeable, and it's different than this show, but yeah, no, it's great stuff. It's a great resource for stroke survivors and caregivers and family, which, there's a lot of information. So I think the more shows, the better. Same with books. The book I found, I was a little surprised to find this book because I believe the original published date was before my stroke. And for whatever reason, I read voraciously. I've talked about it ad nauseum, either on this podcast or my previous podcast, the Lovable Idiot podcast. But yeah, this is a really good book that I found in just the last week, and I started it. So far, so good. We'll talk a ton about some of the things that I really like from that book already and share them here. But the book itself is called Hope After Stroke for Caregivers and Survivors, the holistic guide to getting your life back. Now, that being said, the title may have turned me off initially. Probably because I didn't realize at the time of my stroke really what holistic meant. And, I think with a lot of people who go through a significant life event, sometimes it just takes time to find the right things. And, it's weird to be in these hospitals and facilities and talk to different people. And really, it always surprises me when I've never heard of a book or a resource until now. I'm a couple of years into this. Now, I obviously can't hear everything, but I think that just speaks to the fact that larger communities for survivors are needed because there are tons of resources. Some are easier to find than others for whatever reason. That could be for search engine optimization, even on Amazon. How did I not come across this book? How did I not come across this book? I'm on Amazon, 50 times a day buying X, Y, and Z, either for the house, for the kids, for myself, for my wife, for my daughter. It never ends. I'm on Amazon more than any other website. So again, the book is called Hope After Stroke, Caregivers and Survivors, the holistic guide to getting your life back. And I'm going to mess up her name as well, but it's Sequoia Tanzeman. And the book is great. Honestly, I'm a couple chapters in. I have not read the whole thing, but I wish I found it sooner because, well, no, I don't know that I wish that I found it sooner, but there's some really good stuff in there. And one of the things that I want to talk about today in this episode is kind of, I guess, things that I've done or things that I didn't realize I was doing necessarily because I didn't put it into a book form and really, write down my sort of recipe. But I love this one part of the book. It's in chapter 4. And she talks about the secret sauce. And it's the secret sauce for what makes for exceptional recovery. And I feel like she's got some great points. There are sort of 4 main points that she brings about. Now, this is not scientific. This is not super research. This is more from observation. And I would have to agree with these because, and I have a little bit of a different take on one part, but yeah, it's a great conversation starter. And I think she's right. She hits the nail on the head here in this book. And yeah, there are sort of 4 or 5 factors that really make all the difference in the world. Now, take it with a grain of salt, but sorry. The 4 that she points out are gratitude, humor, persistence, and acceptance. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these. She talks about it at length in the book, and I do recommend you get a copy of the book. I think it's available in paperback, hardback. It's available on Audible if that's your jam. Also available on Kindle. And I think the interesting thing about some of these 4 things, and there was another one she talks about, which I really appreciate, was faith, which I think is the 5th one. And it's not faith necessarily. I mean, it's faith and what faith means to you. Now, I am not particularly religious. I have not raised our children to be particularly that way. I did go to Catholic high school. I am not Catholic. I was raised Presbyterian in New Jersey. My wife is Chilean. She's obviously now a citizen of the US. She's not a practicing Catholic, but she certainly identifies as a Catholic. But no matter, what I loved was, and I really appreciated, was that she said that people who have like faith and whatever that means to you really are it's a big part of having that exceptional recovery and plays a big role. And what I liked is that she said for those that are agnostic or atheist, and I don't really know where I fall on that spectrum, but when it comes to faith, it's like faith in doctors, faith in science, faith in yourself in making that recovery. And it's so important to have that faith and that hope and that belief, because it's not really a passive state of being. It's an active part of life. And that just resonated with me because I feel like that's where I sort of just woke up early on in my recovery, and I was like, I got to figure this out for a lot of reasons, but I wanted to figure it out for myself. And I feel like these really do hit the nail on the head for an exceptional recovery. And, make no mistake about it, this is going to be a little different for everybody, but it's such a great way of summing it up. Gratitude, I think it's a big one. I learned early on in my stay at Brooks Rehab Hospital here and the regular hospital. I'm a big guy. I never really had to ask for help prior to my stroke, but I was always very thankful, very appreciative of the nursing staff. Whether it was a nurse, a CNA, whatever the role was, it didn't matter if it was like the janitorial staff cleaning the room. Just always trying to be polite, say hi and reach out to them and, thank them for their help and that I really did appreciate it. These were things that I couldn't do. I couldn't walk, couldn't get out of bed. So I needed that help. A big thing I learned early on I was very thankful for these individuals who were obviously doing their job, but they were just, I wouldn't say it was like a huge, in some cases it was, but they were playing an active role in making a difference in my life. Yeah. So yeah, gratitude was just, again, it sounds silly. It sounds simple. It's not the way I mean it, but I mean, having gratitude and just being thankful for one, being alive, being able to even, it's so hard to wrap your head around, but it's just such an important part of this journey is that, just be thankful for the opportunity, thankful for the people helping you. It's, I was thankful to be alive, and anybody that helped along the way and still helps along the way, I continue to be very grateful for the opportunity. And I think that's what this podcast is about second chances and making the most of that, and I'm sure there's something we could talk about with gratitude. It's obviously not a small topic, but I think it kind of ties in nicely with humor. That's always been a part of me. That's obviously my previous podcast was called Lovable Idiot. Yeah. So humor obviously ties into, it doesn't obviously tie into gratitude, but humor is a big thing in my book and always has been for various reasons. I think as a bigger kid, I was always drawn to humor. I don't know. Just a big thing in my life, probably from improv and from just being the big guy, the funny guy. It's just something that I've been drawn to. And, I don't want to oversimplify the importance of humor, but one of the things about humor here is that especially for me, and I think any stroke survivor, you really aren't anticipating having this stroke. Although, in a quick aside, I would say 80% of strokes are preventable, which actually makes a ton of sense, right? Because I personally was doing everything wrong from a health management standpoint. And I wouldn't normally say that except for I had high blood pressure. I was not going to doctors. I was drinking heavily. I was smoking. So I fully admit that I was doing everything wrong. So that being said, nobody anticipates having a stroke. Nobody wants to have a stroke. There unfortunately is no rewind button when it comes to having a stroke. So for me, humor was a big thing and continues to be a big thing because I really honestly, as dark and twisted as it sounds, humor shows up in like the most, in the simple, but also kind of like it's just, I sat there again early on. I was just like, oh my God, I'm 37 years old. I'm a father of three with a daughter in high school, another son that was a son that was in kindergarten, another son that was not even in preschool. And I just had to sit there and be like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. And, that's a little dark, but I think the sheer ridiculousness of it is really, I could do nothing but laugh. And yeah, I mean, it's not easy to laugh every day, but I sort of, when I think about where I'm going now and things that I'm doing to really get back to really that exceptional level that I want to be at personally, professionally, and every bit I want, like a lot of survivors, I want to get back, to the business of being me, to the business of running my family, to the business of helping my wife. And I'm not trying to underplay or overplay any of this. It's just like you have to just find the funny. You don't have to do anything, but I think sort of, yeah, that's why these four things really sort of hit home for me, is because you have two choices. You can wake up, put one foot in front of the other. You can kind of do the work, and that's easier said than done, but it's kind of, and I think if you're listening to this podcast, it isn't easy work, but it's worthwhile work. And waking up with that gratitude and appreciation for life, no matter what your situation is, whether you have a little bit of deficit, a ton of deficit, I think everybody's going to be different. That's not a cliche. That's just the way it is, and the reason that every stroke is different is because every brain is completely different. Unfortunately, it's not prescriptive. But I think there are sort of principles, and honestly, this book is a great resource. And I feel like there are other great resources. And it's so amazing to me to just be finding these now a couple of years in. But again, humor, it's sort of, for me, it makes it easier to get up every day. It's not always easy. Some days are difficult. And I think that's true whether you've had a stroke or not. At any stage in life, there are good days and bad days. And again, last week I was talking about one of my doctors who I was listening to on a podcast, and she said the goal is to have more good days than bad days. And yes, that's true, but I'd really rather be at a 90-10 ratio of 90% good days and 10% bad days. And I think humor helps me a ton. Sometimes to my detriment. I push the humor button a little hard sometimes. I've been known to push things, but that's what keeps things light and fun for me. If it's not fun, I don't want to do it. Again, I can't speak for all survivors, but I feel like, if you've been given the second chance and you're doing the work on yourself, and you're kind of quote unquote doing the right things, and you want to get back to a certain thing, life, a boring life is just not, well, I don't even think it's in the cards for me. being that I'm a stroke survivor with MS under the age of 40, or now I am 40. But yeah, I think finding the humor and finding the funny is a big part of my success. And yeah, I mean, honestly, that's why I run every day, is so I can tweet about running, because I hated running my whole life. I sympathize with every single person that hates running. I still really don't fit into the typical quote unquote runner crowd, but I find nothing more hilarious than the fact that I'm running a half marathon a day on average. I think we're at 28 days consecutive of double digit miles. I'm on day 190 something in a row of running. And again, that actually ties in perfectly to the next one she talks about in her book, which is, again, the first one was gratitude. Second is humor. Faith is kind of a part of that. I touched on that, and I really love her take on faith and the broader sense. But yeah, persistence, that's another big one. I am persistent for a lot of reasons, because I'm stubborn like my mother was. I am stubborn like my father was. But I also have 3 kids and a wife that rely on me, and not, yeah, they could make it without me, but like, I want to be here and show up for them. And that same is true for the people that I work with and that I do business with, and the same people that are my friends that I make laugh. Like, I want to show up and make them laugh. I want to get people to see, not just the bright or the dark, just the funny side of life, to have fun. And, you could do both. I believe you can. You can be educational and informative, but you could also be funny and lovable. And that's exactly why this show is called Lovable Survivor. I honestly, I've gotten away a little bit sometimes from being, more of my funny self. But the truth is, this is a serious topic, being a stroke survivor. But I think it's a good reminder to me to keep injecting that humor. It may not be every episode. It may not be every minute of every episode, because some of this stuff is a little heavy. And I do try to lighten it up when I can, when it seems, boy, I'm going to hate myself for saying this, but like, when it's appropriate and when it's not. I mean, I don't think there's really a bad time for humor, but obviously if you're talking about something really difficult, yeah, it's nice to fall back on humor. But there are things like, and I don't know that we've gotten there, but yeah, there's never really a wrong time for humor, but there's moments, I guess, where, as much as I love being the funny guy and finding the funny, there are difficult things and times and topics to kind of turn that humor off. But I love that quirkiness, and I love other people's quirkiness, and I love being able to laugh at myself and laughing at others, and not in a mean way, but just kind of like in a loving, caring way. And if I'm not poking fun at you or myself, that I told my daughter, and she and I have discussed it, because sometimes her friends, like, I'll make fun of them, but it's because I like them. And if I'm not making fun of them, or I'm not teasing or joking, that actually points to a thing that, would be more concerning, is that I really have no thoughts. Yeah, but persistence, that is a broad topic. I mean, again, why do I need to be riding the Peloton every day since June 11th of last year? Now I'm over the 300-day mark of Peloton in a row. And some of these days it's just been a 15-minute ride with Kendall Toole, but it's this drive and persistence to get better. And this again happened in year 2 for me. I think one of the other things, and along the lines of persistence, is I sort of have this persistence about questioning everything. Now, I don't mean questioning in the sense that, like, people are right or wrong, or if there even is a right or wrong, but I always want to continuously learn. I want to continuously get better. And if I don't ask questions of myself and others, I want to make sure I'm pushing and I'm pushing appropriately. Like I'm not pushing too hard where I overdo it because I definitely have that tendency, but I'm just constantly sort of questioning and being persistent. And I think she talks a lot about that in this book, and the fourth ingredient. And I do think, for me, questioning and just being able to ask questions is another part of this equation. This is sort of my take that I'm adding. But her fourth ingredient to the secret sauce was sort of acceptance. And I love this because this again gets me thinking in a different way. And I think acceptance is sometimes confused with agreement or being in agreement with others. And this is a little tough one. She has a really great take in her book on this. And again, I'd recommend everybody go get this book and check it out because I feel like it would have been super helpful to have this book in the beginning, just to sort of a little bit of a roadmap of what to see going forward as a young early survivor beginning the journey. I feel like I've made it through pretty well this far. So when I'm finding the book, is actually perfect. It's a good time for me. But I think, when you think about acceptance, it's not accepting. I mean, it's multifaceted. There's accepting what's happened, right? We can't hit the rewind button. Life is going to change. Life is changed. And there's sort of this acceptance of like, okay, this is my life now. How am I going to best move forward? And acceptance doesn't mean don't question or don't push. It just means, let's find the way that works best so that you can really be that thriving survivor that you want to be. And it is a process and it takes time. And I think it's different for everybody. And it's just growth in progress. It's a work in progress. And I think sort of accepting that, coming to terms, I guess, is a good way of saying it for me, is like, you think about restoration versus compensation, and I think it's just questioning and that constant reevaluation that I talked about, where you're pushing yourself a certain amount and you're evaluating on whether it's monthly or semi-annual, annual basis, things you want to progress, goals you want to have, goals you do have. And if you're making progress, if you feel like, okay, maybe I'm not there yet, but maybe now is the time to focus on it. Like this year, in a way, I've had a little trouble with acceptance because I'm not willing to give up, but it's also, it's, I think typing is a good example. It's like, I don't want to give up on typing, but there are times where, is this the most efficient use of my time? Is this speed something I'm okay with? Do I want to progress in the speed of my typing? There are some limitations, and I know what they are. Like, I would be okay, I think at this point, typing a little bit faster than I currently am. So like, I'm on the way and I'm doing the work. And I've reevaluated where I'm at, and I'm putting a little time in each day. I'm not putting 10 hours a day in, because even if I put 10 hours a day in, I don't think I'm going to get back that in return. So again, that's why it's a constant evaluation with your situation and progress of what you're willing to accept. And I think it just comes in stages. And there are times where, and I'm still surprised by this, I won't pick up a pen really and do some intentional writing for a couple months. And then all of a sudden it's just better. And I think that's the thing too, is sometimes when you're not focusing on something specifically, your brain is still working and adjusting and rewiring. And so Yeah, I mean, I think it's not an overnight process. It comes in stages. It comes at different times. And I think the biggest thing I could say when it comes to all this is that it's not that doctors or therapists, physical therapists, occupational therapists, none of them are wrong. But I do feel like if you keep questioning it, that long-term success and really make that exceptional recovery if you want to, but it isn't without work. It 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 takes support, but support looks different for everybody. I think, family is great for everybody. I think there are people who will stand by you and support you, grow tired, or they will become less involved over time. So I think it's really wrapping your head around what that looks like for you. If you start to notice people dropping off, finding external support, whether it's through an online community, friends, therapists, and I think it's back to that acceptance. You can't control everybody. You shouldn't want to control everybody. Of course, you want everybody to be helpful and be on your team. And, I think we don't give necessarily reasons for people to jump off ship or but people get tired. Even caretakers. My wife is amazing, has been forever, but I think she's not. Yeah, no, she's by no means is she giving up on me, but I think she's sort of, at times she doesn't even know, but she's sort of inadvertently pushing me to push myself. And I think I've caught that recently at times, and we've had conversations, and it's okay. It's fine. I need to push myself a little bit. That is a difficult skill to master as a survivor. And the last thing I'll kind of touch on today's episode is, you want to be safe. You want to push yourself. You want to strive to get better. And sometimes it just can be confusing about when you need to push yourself a little more. It can be frustrating because you want to do something quickly. And so if you only got 5 minutes and you do something that's going to take you 10, it's tough. But I think pushing yourself to a little bit in that case where it's safe and not the end of the world, obviously pushing yourself is how you're going to progress. So again, the podcast is No Stroke. It's with Mike and David. Great show. Check it out. The book, again, is called Hope After Stroke. For caregivers and survivors, the holistic guide to getting your life back. Really good book. Wish I had found it sooner. Not even sure why these two things are not things I didn't find sooner. But I guess that's part of the journey. As a survivor, you kind of go in these phases and you work on a thing and you get into a thing and you do a thing that's working. You progress and then you go back and you reevaluate. And I think I am no different than any other survivor. I think I'm in the same process. And I hope you found this super helpful. And I hope, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you read this book, if you found it helpful, I know I have so far. I have not finished it, so we'll probably touch on it again. And again, go check out the No Stroke podcast. The guys seem great. Great show. Lots of different interviews. I love hearing their perspective and their things that they talk about because I think it's super beneficial. So anyways, with that, we'll wrap this episode up and I'll see you next week. Bye. As always, I hope you did enjoy this episode of the podcast. And if you enjoyed this episode or another episode, maybe you'll consider leaving us a review. You can do so on our website, podcast.lovablesurvivor.com, or inside your favorite podcast player app, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, GetPods, or another podcast player. It really does help grow the show, get the word out. Being a survivor is not easy, and others could benefit. So again, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next week on the Lovable Survivor podcast.